jagged silhouette of Alcatraz rises from the misty waters of San Francisco Bay, like a sentinel carved from stone and sorrow. Even in daylight, the island exudes a formidable presence, a fortress of cold walls and iron bars that once imprisoned the most dangerous souls in America. But it is in the shadows, in the spaces between the bars and the silence of its corridors, that Alcatraz tells its truest story, a story of broken lives, despair crystallized into walls, and spirits that refuse to leave. Alcatraz, the infamous rock, is more than a prison. It is a mausoleum of memories, a place where time folds upon itself, and the restless dead linger like echoes of a past that cannot be silenced. Before becoming a federal penitentiary in 1934, Alcatraz carried the weight of history. In the mid-19th century, it was a military fort, and later, a military prison. Soldiers stationed there spoke of apparitions haunting the night watch, shadowy figures pacing the ramparts when no one should have been present. Fog rolling in from the bay amplified every sound, every whisper, every unspoken thought. Some claimed to hear laughter, others shrieks, and occasionally the hollow echo of footsteps where none should be. The island, isolated from the mainland, became a crucible not only of punishment, but of lingering unrest. When Alcatraz became a federal penitentiary, it earned a reputation as America's ultimate hell, designed to contain the nation's most notorious criminals. The prison's philosophy was psychological as much as physical. Isolation would break the spirit. Al Capone, George Machine Gun Kelly, Robert Stroud, the Birdman of Alcatraz, dozens more confined here. They were men with the capacity for violence and cunning, yet even they could not withstand the oppressive silence that settled like a shroud over the cell blocks. Inmates reported feeling watched when no guards were present, a presence that seemed to know their deepest fears. Guards described shadows moving just beyond the corner of their eyes, and occasional shrill, untraceable screams echoing through empty halls. Isolation cells, the dreaded holes, were particularly haunted. These small, dimly lit spaces deprived prisoners of sensory input, and many minds frayed under the weight of loneliness. Visitors today report sudden drops in temperature, inexplicable chills, and the sensation of being touched when no one is there. Whispers, at first unintelligible, often form words of despair, rage, or plea for mercy. At night, the cries of long-dead inmates mingle with the fog, as if the bay itself carries their suffering to the mainland, echoing in the minds of those who dare to listen. Among the apparitions, the Grey Lady is perhaps the most persistent. Witnesses describe a tall, indistinct figure gliding through corridors, face obscured, yet undeniably human in shape. Some say she was a prisoner, others claim a guard. A few believe she represents the island itself, an amalgamation of decades of sorrow and torment. Those who glimpsed her describe a sensation of being studied, of their innermost fears and guilt mirrored back. She is not violent, but unrelenting. A reminder that Alcatraz never relinquishes what it holds. The island's natural environment intensifies the haunting. Waters surrounding Alcatraz are icy, gray, and restless, reflecting the moods of spirits trapped within the walls. Storms sweep across the island, howling through bars, rattling doors, and carrying the echoes of prisoners' cries. Fog descends abruptly, transforming familiar paths into twisting mazes. In such moments, it becomes impossible to tell whether fear arises from the island itself or from the collective memory it imposes upon its visitors. Escape attempts left lasting imprints on Alcatraz's supernatural landscape. The infamous 1962 escape of Frank Morris and the Englund brothers, who vanished into the night without a trace, is said to tether their spirits to the island. Others who perished in failed attempts, falling to their deaths or succumbing to icy waters, reportedly replay their final moments. Visitors often sense sudden cold gusts near the shore, hear splashing when the tide is calm, and feel invisible presences guiding or obstructing steps. Violent riots also contributed to the island's ghostly reputation. The 1946 Battle of Alcatraz left 2 correctional officers and 3 inmates dead. To this day, some visitors report seeing shadowy reenactments of chaos, muffled shouts, commands in forgotten languages, the clang of metal, and spectral figures darting across corridors. It is as though the violence itself is enshrined, replaying endlessly for anyone sensitive enough to perceive it. The dining hall, once a place of uneasy communal life, now resonates with the clatter of invisible trays and whispers of conversations that never occurred. The recreation yard echoes with footsteps on concrete, shouts of long-dead prisoners, and metallic clangs of unseen objects. Even the guardhouse harbors unexplainable phenomena. Doors swing open on their own, lights flicker, and an oppressive sense of being watched permeates the space. Nighttime explorations amplify encounters. Ghost hunters and investigators report irregular electromagnetic readings, EVPs capturing anguished moans and sudden temperature drops. Alcatraz is often called the thin place, where the veil between the living and dead is fragile. The island acts as a conduit for restless spirits, each carrying fragments of former lives, despair, regret, and anger fused into stone and steel. Human presence makes Alcatraz's hauntings especially poignant. These spirits are not aimless shadows. They are echoes of real lives, bound by the violence, fear, and isolation they endured. Capricious guards, desperate inmates, botched escapes, and brutal riots left psychic fingerprints persisting long after the prison's closure in 1963. Walking its corridors today, one feels the oppressive weight of these histories pressing down, a silent reminder that some forms of imprisonment extend beyond mortal life. Visitors' reports blur legend and reality. Some claim to see figures resembling famous inmates, Capone's commanding silhouette, Stroud's quiet presence, Kelly's restless pacing. Others hear laughter, sobbing, or singing fragments of lives once present. Alcatraz functions as a mirror, reflecting not only past traumas, but also fears and imaginations of those who step inside. The physical decay adds to the haunting aura. Rust creeps across bars, paint peels, and concrete fractures under decades of wear. Each crack hums with latent memories, inviting the living to listen. Fog envelops the island. City lights blur across the horizon. Alcatraz becomes a realm where boundaries between life and death, past and present, collapse. The air vibrates with whispers of souls, an invisible congregation eternally bound to the rock. Visitors alone at night often experience unsettling phenomena. Disembodied footsteps trailing behind, invisible pressure on shoulders, cold hands brushing skin, or eyes seemingly tracking movements. One night, a visitor recounted walking past cell block D when a faint cigar smell filled the air. Moments later, an inexplicable chill swept the hall, followed by a whisper of a name etched in history, yet unspoken for decades. Tales of inmate spirits add depth. Robert Stroud, the Birdman, haunts upper corridors, sometimes accompanied by fluttering wings, though no bird is present. Capone's aura lingers in his cell, a subtle command presence. Kelly manifests in fleeting shadows near the yard, pacing restlessly, eternally planning an escape that never came. Each ghost carries fragments of mortal identity, shaping the haunted personality of the prison. The environment, the wind, fog, and restless sea interacts with spectral manifestations. Storms mirror screams of the trapped. Fog obscures vision, making the living feel adrift in a liminal space. Even in clear weather, reflective waters and oppressive walls create dislocation, reminding visitors they are surrounded by echoes suspended between worlds. Thin places, where the barrier between living and dead is fragile, are amplified here. Walls absorb sorrow, rage, and desperation, radiating it to those sensitive enough. Paranormal investigators describe sensations of being watched, entities moving with purpose, carrying memories, unfinished business, or the residue of anguish. Stories among guards and visitors reinforce the spectral reputation. The clang of long-gone gates, echoes of fights, whispers of arguments. Children of former guards, decades later, recount shadowy figures and unexplained laughter. Researchers sensitive to psychic phenomena describe being followed, observed, sometimes touched. Amid the terror, there is a lure. Alcatraz draws historians, thrill-seekers, and paranormal enthusiasts eager to witness history intersecting the supernatural. The haunting is not sporadic, it is essence. Spirits are ever present, chroniclers of human experience, witnesses to suffering, and reminders of the consequences of isolation and violence. Each visitor leaves with their own story: cold drafts, whispered names, vanishing shadows, or unseen eyes. The island, abandoned and decaying, remains vividly alive, its life force, composed of memories, anguish, and spectral energy. Alcatraz teaches that history is not confined to books or photographs. It persists in whispers, cold spots, and fleeting glimpses. The tale expands when considering escapes and deaths. Every failed escape, every riot, every suicide leaves a residue trapped in stone. Morris and Anglin, the 1962 escapees, may haunt the shoreline. Others, drowned or fallen, replay their last moments endlessly. The thin-place nature of Alcatraz ensures these echoes are not only remembered, but re-experienced by the living. Visitor interactions amplify these hauntings. Some report feeling sudden grief or anger, as if touching the psychic residue of inmates. Others experience fleeting visions, hands, shadows, glimpses of moments before tragedy struck. A single corridor can feel like a river of time, flowing past, present, and spectral all at once. Alcatraz, in its decay, is a living chronicle. Rusted bars, crumbling concrete, and peeling paint preserve emotion more vividly than any photograph. Night fog and cold winds carry whispers from the past. Shadows flicker in impossible ways. The very air vibrates with memory. Each gust of wind a messenger from souls trapped between worlds. The hauntings themselves tell of endurance. They are reminders of what isolation, fear, and brutality leave behind. The living cannot undo the past, yet they witness it, hear it, and feel it. Alcatraz is a repository not of treasure, but of memory, suffering, and spirit. Its corridors, cells, and yards are arenas where history plays on repeat, where the living must navigate not only stone and steel, but sorrow incarnate. Even the smallest sounds, the creak of a door, the rattle of a hinge, a distant footstep take on meaning. In the cell blocks, whispers of the deceased are carried on cold drafts. Visitors report sudden feelings of panic, inexplicable dread, or the sensation of being touched by unseen hands. The prison's architecture itself seems designed not only to confine bodies, but to entrap essence, and essence persists. The Grey Lady glides through corridors, the Birdman whispers from shadows, Capone's authority lingers, and Kelly's nervous pacing remains eternal. Other lesser-known spirits roam freely, prisoners lost to obscurity, guards who died in line of duty, the victims of riots, and those who succumbed to despair. Each is a chapter in the story of Alcatraz, a story that refuses to end. Alcatraz stands today not just as a historical site, but as a spiritual landmark. Tours, research, and ghost investigations continue to reveal evidence of its living past. Instruments measure EMF spikes. Cameras capture inexplicable movements. Audio devices record voices that cannot be explained. Even skeptics feel the weight of the island. A combination of psychological suggestion and undeniable presence that cannot be dismissed entirely. Ultimately, Alcatraz is a meditation on the nature of confinement, memory, and the afterlife. The ghosts do not torment arbitrarily. They exist as witnesses, reminders, and chroniclers. They hold on to the island because the living world cannot fully acknowledge the depth of suffering once endured. The rock is not merely stone and steel. It is a repository for human history, emotion, and spirit, alive with spectral inhabitants who speak, move, and watch. And as night deepens, fog thickens, and the wind howls across the bay, one can hear the chorus of Alcatraz's ghosts. Laughter, anguish, whispers all intermingle in a symphony that transcends time. The island is a living chronicle, haunted by memory, history, and the souls who refuse to leave. In the end, Alcatraz teaches that history is alive, that suffering leaves residue, and that some places, once touched by pain and despair, are never empty. Every corridor, every barred window, every cell holds a story. The ghosts of Alcatraz are witnesses, replaying fragments of lives, confronting the living with endurance, isolation, and mortality. To step on the rock is to enter a cathedral of memory and spirit, to walk alongside shadows older than time, and to feel the chilling brush of history itself.